My name is Daniel. I'm 53 years old, and the day my world almost collapsed started with a simple knock on a wooden door. Not a scream, not an alarm, just a quiet, shaky voice behind me saying, "Mr. Carter, please, don't go inside." I was standing in the hallway outside my daughter Emily's apartment, holding a small box of her favorite pastries. It was supposed to be a peace offering, a father's apology after a stupid argument. I had rehearsed what I was going to say 100 times on the drive over, but the words died in my throat when I turned around. It was her neighbor, a young man in his late 20s, pale, nervous, fingers gripping the strap of his backpack like it was holding him together. His name was Alex. I knew him by face, not much more. We had exchanged polite hellos before, nothing deeper. This time, there was nothing polite in his eyes. They were wide, afraid, like he already knew something I didn't, something about my daughter, about what was happening behind that door. "What did you say?" I asked. My hand was already on the doorknob. I had the spare key Emily had given me for emergencies. My heart was beating fast, but in a normal way, the way it beats when you're nervous to see someone you love after a fight. "Don't go inside," he repeated, his voice even lower. "Please, just come with me for a second." I frowned. Was there a gas leak? An accident? Had something happened to Emily? To her husband, Mark? 100 disasters flashed through my mind in half a second. My fingers tightened around the handle. "I don't have time for games," I snapped, more sharply than I meant to. "Is something wrong? Is my daughter okay?" He glanced at the door, then back at me. His jaw clenched as if he was bracing himself for the impact of his own words. "She's fine," he said slowly. "But if you walk through that door right now, you're going to hear something you can't unhear, and you'll never look at her the same way again." The hallway suddenly felt too quiet. The hum of the building, the faint sound of traffic outside, even my own breathing. Everything faded into one sharp, painful silence. My first instinct was anger. Who was this kid to talk to me like that about my own daughter? About the girl I had raised after her mother died? The girl whose scraped knees I had kissed, whose nightmares I had calmed, whose graduation I cried through in the back row. I almost barked at him to move out of the way, but something about his face stopped me. It wasn't smug. It wasn't cruel. It was sad, like he was about to hurt me with the truth, even though he didn't want to. "Mr. Carter," he whispered, "please, just trust me. Give me 10 minutes. If after that you still want to go inside, I won't stop you." 10 minutes. That was all he asked for. I looked at my daughter's door. The door I had helped her paint when she first moved in. The door that led to the life she had built with a man I wasn't sure I trusted. The door I believed would open to a simple apology and a hug. Instead, it was about to open to something else. Something that would nearly break me. I took my hand off the doorknob. "Fine," I said quietly. "You got 10 minutes. You'd better make them worth it." If you had asked anyone who knew me who I was a few years ago, they would have given you a simple answer. "Daniel? Oh, he's Emily's dad." That was my identity. That's how I saw myself. Not as an engineer. Not as a widower. Not as a man with hobbies or dreams of his own. Just Emily's father. When my wife, Laura, passed away from sudden illness, Emily was only 12. I remember standing in our kitchen, staring at her cereal bowl the morning after the funeral, wondering how in the world I was supposed to be both mother and father at the same time. I failed a lot. I burned dinners. I missed PTA meetings. I gave the wrong advice more often than I'd like to admit, but I never stopped trying. I worked late and still woke up early to drive her to school. I learned how to braid hair from YouTube tutorials. I sat in the front row at her school plays, clapping louder than anyone else even when her only line was, "Here's your mail, sir." When Emily got into college, I cried in the parking lot after dropping her off. Not because I was sad, but because I was proud. My little girl, the kid who used to fall asleep on my chest during cartoon marathons, was stepping into her own life. And then, of course, came Mark. He was charming when I first met him. That's the thing about people like him. They know how to put on a show. He shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, complimented the old watch I was wearing. He laughed at my dad jokes, helped carry groceries into the kitchen, and talked about how much he respected family. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that Laura, wherever she was, would be happy that our daughter had found someone who seemed so devoted. So when Emily told me they were engaged, I swallowed every doubt and smiled. I helped pay for the wedding. I gave him a large chunk of my savings for a down payment on this very apartment. I even put my house up as collateral so they could get a better interest rate on a loan. It's just paperwork, Dad, Emily had said, waving off my concerns. You worry too much. Maybe I did, or maybe I didn't worry enough, because over time, small cracks appeared. Mark quit one job after another. There was always a story, a toxic boss, an unfair environment, a company that didn't value him. He always had a beer in his hand when I visited. Emily laughed him off at first, but I could see the tension building behind her eyes. Then came the first argument about money. Dad, can we borrow just a little more? Just until Mark gets something stable? I always said yes. Always. Until the last time. The last time I said no, not because I didn't want to help, but because I already had. Again and again. My savings were almost gone. My retirement plan looked thinner every month. We're not children. Emily had snapped over the phone. You act like we're trying to ruin you. I never said that. I replied softly. I have limits. I'm not a bank. There had been a long silence. Then a cold, flat reply. Fine. Don't worry. You won't have to hear from us for a while. She hung up. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of no calls. No texts. No good morning, Dad messages. 3 weeks of staring at my phone like a teenager, waiting for the screen to light up with her name. It never did. So I bought her favorite pastries, rehearsed a clumsy apology that I wasn't even sure I owed, and drove over to the apartment. I thought the worst thing I'd have to face was her anger. I had no idea what was waiting for me instead. Alex's apartment was right across the hall from Emily's. I had walked past his door 100 times without really seeing it. Just another neighbor, another anonymous person living within these beige walls and thin floors. This time, when he unlocked the door and gestured for me to come in, my chest tightened. The inside of his place was small but neat, a couch with a worn blanket draped over it, a tiny dining table with one chair pulled out, a couple of houseplants that looked like they were trying their best to survive. He closed the door softly behind us. Look, I said, try and keep the impatience out of my voice. I don't know what you think is going on, but I didn't come here to... I know, he cut in. You came to apologize. I heard some of the fight. Walls are thin. I flinched a little. He wasn't wrong. And you love your daughter a lot, he added, almost as if he wanted to soften the blow. Yes, I replied, which is exactly why I should be out there talking to her right now, instead of whatever this is. He took a slow breath, walked over to his small TV stand, and picked up his phone. Mr. Carter, he said quietly, you don't know me. I get that. I'm just a neighbor, but I've lived here for 3 years. I've seen your daughter and Mark since they moved in. I've heard things. My stomach twisted. What kind of things? I asked. The question came out sharper than I intended. Fear always wears the clothes of anger. At first, I thought it was just normal arguments, he continued. Money, stress, job stuff. I tried to ignore it. It wasn't my business. But it got worse, especially when your name came up. My name, I repeated, feeling a strange chill crawl up my spine. He nodded. You know how in this building, our balconies kind of overlap, he said. Sometimes people forget they're not alone out there. One night, I was out on mine and I overheard something I wish I hadn't. He tapped on his phone, swiped a few times, then turned the screen off as if deciding whether he really wanted to do this. Overheard what? I pressed. He looked me in the eyes. Emily talking to Mark about you, he said softly. About your house, your savings, about how once everything was signed, they wouldn't have to pretend anymore. The room seemed to tilt. Pretend what? I whispered. Alex swallowed. That they needed you, he replied. That they cared about what you wanted. That you were anything more than a stepping stone. I laughed. It was a broken, humorless sound that didn't feel like it belonged to me. That's ridiculous, I said. I know my daughter. She's not, she wouldn't. I couldn't even finish the sentence, because a tiny, cruel part of my mind, the part that remembered her last cold words on the phone, whispered, "Are you sure?" "I wouldn't be telling you this if I didn't have proof," Alex said. He walked over to a small shelf, took out a cheap plastic object, and put it on the table. It was a little audio recorder. He pressed play. At first, all I heard was static and the distant hum of traffic. Then, a familiar voice. My daughter's voice. "He's so dramatic, Mark. He'll sign whatever we put in front of him. He always does. Just give it time." I froze. "I'm tired of giving it time." Another voice replied, Mark's. "I'm tired of waiting for your dad to just hand everything over. You promised me we'd have the house by the end of the year." "We will," Emily said. "Once he signs the power of attorney papers. It's basically ours. He trusts me. He thinks I'm still his little girl." He laughed. "And what if he doesn't sign?" "Then we push," she said. "We guilt him. Make him feel like he's ruining our future. He can't stand the idea of not being the good father. He'll break." The words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. Alex paused the recording. My heart thundered in my chest. My hands trembled in my lap. A ringing sound filled my ears, like I was underwater. "No," I whispered. "No. This has to be taken out of context. You don't know what they were talking about. You." "I have more," Alex said gently. "From different nights." He pressed play again. "Once we have the house, we can rent it, sell it, do whatever we want." Emily's voice said calmly, "He'll be fine. He doesn't need much. He's old, Mark. He'll just stay in some small apartment or, I don't know. It's not like he's going to start a new life." Another pause, and emotionally, Mark asked, "You sure you can handle it when he realizes we used him?" There was a moment of silence. Then Emily's voice again, colder this time. "I handled losing my mom," she said. "I'll handle him too." Alex stopped recording. The room was completely silent for several seconds. My own daughter, my own child, talking about me like I was a piece of furniture to be moved around, a resource to be drained, not a father, not a person, just an obstacle. "Why are you showing me this?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely audible. "Because," Alex replied quietly, "they're in there right now talking about the same thing. I heard your name through the wall. I didn't want you walking in unprepared. I didn't want you to step into a trap without knowing it was a trap." I stared at the floor. The pastries in the box on my lap suddenly felt stupid, childish, like a prop from a play I hadn't realized I was in. "I didn't record this to spy," Alex added quickly. "At first, I was scared. They talked about you like you were disposable. It didn't sit right with me. So I started recording in case something happened to you, in case you needed evidence." Evidence. The word sounded foreign in my ears. This was my daughter, not some stranger. This was Emily, my little girl. My heart twisted painfully. "I'm sorry," Alex said. "I know this hurts. But if you had walked through that door just now, they were going to ask you to sign something they'd been planning, and you would have said yes." He was right. Of course I would have, because that's what I always did. I always said yes. Until now. I don't remember standing up. One minute, I was on Alex's couch, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles were white. The next, I was back in the hallway, staring at my daughter's door again, the audio still echoing in my brain. "He'll break. I'll handle him too. He's old." Every word cut deeper than the last. I felt like someone had picked up my entire life, turned it upside down, and shaken it until every memory spilled onto the floor. Every bedtime story, every birthday party, every late-night conversation after her heart breaks, Had all of it meant so little to her? Mr. Carter, Alex said gently behind me. What are you going to do? I didn't answer right away. Anger was boiling up inside me, hot and wild, begging to explode. I wanted to burst through that door, slam my fist on the table, and scream, How could you? How could you talk about me like that? I am your father. But another voice, quieter, steadier, pushed through the rage. Don't react. Think. I took a deep breath. Then another. I'm going to knock, I said finally. Alex frowned. Are you sure that's... Yes, I cut in, but I'm not going to sign anything. He nodded slowly. I'll be right here, he said. If you need anything. I walked a few steps to Emily's door that now felt like miles. My hand hovered for a second before I forced myself to knock twice. There was a pause. Footsteps. The door opened. Emily stood there, eyes slightly puffy, hair pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing the old college sweatshirt I'd bought her years ago. For a moment, just seeing her made my heart ache with something almost like relief. Dad, she said, surprise flashing across her face. What are you doing here? Her expression shifted quickly from shock to something softer, rehearsed. Can I come in? I asked. Of course, she replied, stepping aside. I walked into the apartment. It looked the same as the last time I'd been there. The same beige couch. The same coffee stain on the carpet from the time Mark had dropped his mug and laughed it off. The same framed photo of Emily and me at her graduation, sitting on the TV stand. The only new thing was the stack of papers neatly arranged on the dining table. Legal-looking papers. My stomach dropped. Hey, Daniel, Mark said from the kitchen, leaning on the counter with a fake casual smile. Didn't know you were coming over. I brought pastries, I said automatically, setting the box down on the table next to the documents. Wow! Great timing, Emily said, forcing a laugh. We were just talking about you. I bet you were, I thought bitterly. Yeah, Mark added quickly. We were actually hoping to talk to you soon. About, something important. Maybe it's good you came. I walked closer to the table. About what? I asked, even though I already knew. Emily glanced at Mark, then back at me with an expression that was supposed to be nervous but hopeful. To someone who didn't know better, it might have looked sincere. I knew better now. Well, you know how things have been a little tight for us, she began. Work's been unstable. Rent is going up. And, we've been thinking about the future. All of our future, including yours. How thoughtful, I said quietly. She didn't seem to notice the edge in my voice. We talked to a financial advisor, she continued, and he suggested something that could help everyone, especially you. So you don't have to stress about managing things on your own as you get older. There it was. The script, the performance. She gestured to the stack of papers on the table. It's just some documents, she said. If you put certain assets under our management, it'll protect you legally. It's like you'd be giving us permission to handle stuff for you. Power of attorney, basically, very standard. Mark chimed in, nodding enthusiastically. Yeah, man, he said, tons of people do this. It makes everything smoother. Bills, property, medical decisions. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. I picked up the top page. My name was on it. So was theirs. So was the phrase, irrevocable authority, in multiple paragraphs. Did a lawyer explain all of this to you? I asked calmly. Yeah, Emily said quickly. Totally. We looked it all over. It's safe, Dad. We wouldn't suggest anything that could hurt you. Lies. I could hear the recording in my head. Once he signs, it's basically ours. He'll break. A part of me wanted to shout the truth right then, to pull out my phone, hit play, and watch their faces crumble as their own words betrayed them. But something stopped me. Maybe it was a quiet voice inside me that had learned, over years of being a single parent, that the first reaction is rarely the wise one. Maybe it was a part of me that wanted to understand why before I destroyed whatever was left between us. Or maybe it was something else. A plan. I set the papers back down slowly and met Emily's eyes. You really think this is what's best for me? I asked. She nodded eagerly. Yes, we just want to make sure you're taken care of. You've done so much for us, Dad. Let us do something for you now. It almost sounded convincing. Almost. I forced a small, tired smile. Okay, I said, leave the papers with me. I'll take them home, read them carefully, and if I agree, I'll sign. Disappointment flickered across Mark's face for a second before he smoothed it over. Yeah, sure, he said. We just figured maybe you could skim them now. We even flag where you need to sign. He pointed to the yellow sticky notes protruding from the stack. Of course they had. I learned a long time ago not to sign anything important without reading it properly, I replied. You taught me that. Remember? She forced a smile of her own. Right, she said. Of course. Take your time. I picked up the papers, slid them into my bag, and turned to leave. Dad, Emily said, her voice suddenly softer, almost pleading. We're only doing this because we love you. I paused at the door. Once, I would have believed those words with all my heart. Now, they felt like a line from a play in a theater I no longer wanted to sit in. I know, I said quietly, not trusting myself to say anything more. And then I walked out, into the hallway, back toward Alex's door, back toward the truth and the beginning of my revenge. I sat in my car for a long time before driving home. The papers sat on the passenger seat, like a living thing, heavy and dangerous. Every bump in the road made them shift, as if they were reminding me they were there. A quiet threat with legal language and small print. Once upon a time, I would have gone straight home, signed wherever they told me to, and felt grateful that my child wanted to take care of me. That Daniel was gone. The man who drove home that evening was someone else. Not colder, not crueler, just clearer. I made 3 stops that day. The first was at a small coffee shop where I sat in a corner and read every single page of those documents. Slowly, carefully, twice. They weren't just giving Emily and Mark permission to help me. They were giving themselves control. Control over my house, my accounts, my medical decisions, my retirement. Once signed, I wouldn't be able to reverse it without their agreement. They would own my future. The second stop I made was at an electronics store, where I bought a small audio recorder that could fit in my pocket. Maybe it was petty to mirror Alex's actions. Maybe it was smart. I decided it didn't matter. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to threaten. I was going to document. The third stop was the most important. A law office. The building was older, tucked away on a quiet street. The name on the door, Henderson and Cole, had been there for decades. I knew, because I had driven past it almost every day on my way to work for years. I walked in, documents in hand, and asked the receptionist if anyone was available for a consultation. 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a calm voice. Her name was Lisa Henderson. "How can I help you, Mr. Carter?" she asked. I slid the stack of papers across the table. "My daughter wants me to sign these," I said. "I need you to tell me exactly what they mean. No sugarcoating." She read them silently for several minutes. Her expression didn't change much, but her fingers tightened slightly on the edges. "Did your daughter draft these?" she finally asked. "No," I replied. She said a financial advisor suggested them. "Then either the advisor is incredibly sloppy," Lisa said, "or incredibly biased." She tapped a paragraph near the end. "If you sign these as is, you give your daughter and her husband permanent control over your property and finances," she explained. "They could sell your house, move you into any facility they choose, make decisions on your behalf without your consent, and you would have very little legal ground to fight it later. So I'd be handing them my life." I said. "In a way," she replied, not unkindly. I took a breath. "Can they be rewritten?" I asked. "In a way that protects me instead?" Her eyes softened slightly. "Yes," she said. "Absolutely. Power of attorney doesn't have to be a weapon. It can be a protective tool. It's all in how it's drafted." That was the moment something shifted inside me. I realized I didn't have to choose between 2 extremes, blind trust or brutal severing. There was another option, Control, not over my daughter, over myself. What if, I asked slowly, I signed a different set of documents, one that gives limited authority only in emergencies, and at the same time, I move my house into a trust, one where I decide what happens to it, not them. She nodded. That's wise, she said. You can name a neutral executor. You can lay out clear conditions. You can make sure no one can pressure you into something later. No one, I repeated. We spent the next hour drafting new papers. Real ones. Documents that protected my interests instead of erasing them. A trust for my house that would ensure it went where I wanted it to go. A will that reflected what I truly believed. That help should be earned, not assumed. By the time I left, I felt different, still hurt, still shattered by what I'd heard, but no longer helpless. On the drive home, I rehearsed my next steps in my mind. I knew Emily and Mark would call me soon, asking if I had looked over the papers. I knew they would push, guilt trip, maybe even cry. They were counting on the same man they'd always known, the father who would do anything for his daughter, even at his own expense. They didn't realize that something inside that father had changed the moment he heard those recordings. They didn't realize the man they were trying to manipulate had finally decided to stop playing their game and start his own. My revenge wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be explosive. It would be simple. I would show them who they had turned me into, and I would let the consequences of that choice settle where they belonged, on their shoulders. 2 days later, Emily called me. The screen lit up with her name, the same way it always had. But this time, the sight of it didn't fill me with automatic warmth. It filled me with caution. "Hey, Dad," she said, her voice bright, too bright. "Did you get a chance to look at the papers?" "I did," I replied calmly. "And?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the tightness beneath her words. "There a lot," I said. "I think it might be better if we talk in person. Over dinner. Here at my house. I'll cook." There was a beat of silence. "You'll cook?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," I said. "Like old times." She hesitated. Then, "Okay, sure. We'll come by tomorrow night." "Good," I said. "Bring the originals, just in case." The next evening, I set the table with old plates that had once felt too fancy for everyday use. I simmered stew on the stove the way Laura used to. The house smelled like our past. Comfort, warmth, normalcy. It was almost cruel. At exactly 7, there was a knock on the door. I took a deep breath and opened it. Emily stood there, coat buttoned, clutching her bag. Mark was behind her, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes scanning the hallway like he was checking for witnesses. "Hey, Dad," Emily said, leaning in for a hug. I let her. I hugged her back. She still smelled like the same shampoo she'd used in high school. It hurt, in a way I can't fully explain, to know how deeply I loved this person who could speak about me the way she had. "Come in," I said. They stepped inside, taking in the familiar living room. "Wow," Mark said, trying to sound relaxed. "You went all out. Smells great." "Sit," I replied. We ate in relative silence at first. I talked about normal things, the weather, the news, the neighbor's noisy dog. They pretended to listen, but I could tell their minds were on one thing only, the papers. Finally, after the plates were mostly empty, Emily cleared her throat. "So," she began, reaching into her bag, "about the documents." She pulled out the same stack I had taken to Lisa's office, the same sticky notes, the same eager expectation. I watched her for a long moment. "Before we get into that," I said gently, "I want to ask you a question, Emily." She blinked. "Okay," she said slowly. "What is it?" "If I had not read these papers," I said, tapping the stack, "and had just signed them, would you have told me what they really meant?" She shifted in her seat. "Dad, we already told you." "No." I cut in, still calm. "You told me what you wanted me to think they meant. That's different." Mark rolled his eyes. "Come on, Daniel," he said. "This is getting dramatic. It's just—" "Don't," I said, my voice dropping slightly. "Don't talk down to me, Mark. Not tonight." He swallowed whatever he was about to say. Emily exhaled, annoyance creeping into her expression. "You're overthinking this," she said. "We didn't want to overwhelm you with details. That's all. We're just trying to make things easier for you when you get older." I studied her face. It was a face I had kissed goodnight thousands of times. The face I had watched light up when she learned to ride a bike. The face I had seen streaked with tears after her first breakup. When I had held her and promised her she would find someone who deserved her. Somewhere along the way, she had decided that I was the one she deserved to use. "Here's the thing," I said softly. "I took these to a lawyer." Their reactions were immediate. Mark stiffened. Emily's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before she forced a smile. "A lawyer?" she repeated. "Dad, why would you—" "Because I wanted to be sure," I replied. "And I am now." I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out a different stack of documents. Cleaner, neater, with Lisa's firm logo at the top. "What's that?" Mark asked. "This," I said, "is my new trust, my new will, and a carefully written, limited power of attorney that only activates under specific circumstances, drafted by someone whose job is to protect me, not take advantage of me." Emily's face went pale. "Wait," she said slowly. "So you're not signing ours?" I looked her in the eyes. "No," I said, "I'm not." Mark scoffed. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "We were trying to help you, and now you're acting like we're some kind of villains in your head." I felt a strange calm settle over me. I reached into my pocket, took out the small recorder, and placed it on the table between us. "I didn't come up with this idea on my own," I said quietly. "I had help from someone who heard you talking when you thought nobody else could hear." Their eyes flicked to the device. "What is that?" Emily whispered, something very similar to what Alex used. I replied. She frowned. "Alex," she echoed. "Your neighbor," I said. "The one with the thin balcony wall. The one who listened to you discuss how you'd handle me once I signed everything over. How I was owed. How I break." Color drained from her face. "That's not—" I pressed play. Her own voice filled the room. "Once he signs a power of attorney papers, it's basically ours. He trusts me. He thinks I'm still his little girl." Then Mark's voice. "I'm tired of waiting. You promised me we'd have a house by the end of the year." Then hers again. "We will. Once everything is signed, we don't have to pretend anymore." I watched them listen to themselves. Watched the realization sink in that the words they thought were safe inside four walls had found their way back to the person they were about. To me. I pressed stop. No one spoke for several seconds. Emily's hands were shaking in her lap. Mark's jaw was clenched so tight, I thought he might crack a tooth. "Dad," Emily finally said, her voice small and breaking, that was taken out of context. We were stressed. We didn't mean—" "You didn't mean what?" I asked quietly. "Didn't mean to call me old? Didn't mean to talk about me like a project? Didn't mean to say you'd handle me like I was a problem to be solved?" Tears filled her eyes. "You've always helped us," she said. We didn't know how to ask anymore. We panicked. We messed up, but we do care about you, Dad. We do. Do you?" I asked. "Or do you care about what I can give you?" Silence. Mark slammed his hand on the table. "This is getting out of hand," he snapped. "So what? You think you're some kind of victim now? After everything you chose to give us? We never forced you. You gave willingly." "Yes," I said. "I did. Because I believe my daughter loved me. Because I believe I was investing in her future, not being used as a stepping stone." He scoffed again. "Same thing." "No," I replied. "It isn't." I reached for my new documents. "These are already signed," I said. "Filed. Legal. My house is in a trust. My finances are under my control. If something happens to me, a neutral executor takes over. Not you. If I ever need help, I'll choose how and from whom." Emily covered her mouth with her hand. "So that's it," she whispered. "You're cutting us off?" I felt a sharp pain in my chest at the thought. "No," I said. Her eyes flickered with hope for half a second. I'm not cutting you off, I continued. I'm just stepping back. I will not fund your lifestyle anymore. I will not sign away my security, so you can feel comfortable. If you ever come to me for help again, it will need to sound very different from this. Mark stood up abruptly, chair scraping the floor. Let's go, he said to Emily. We don't have to sit here and be... She stayed seated. She was crying now, not the dramatic tears of manipulation. Real ones. The kind that come when you finally realize what you've done is not just a small mistake, but a fracture in something that might never fully heal. Dad, she said, voice trembling, I'm sorry. I believe that, at least in part. But apology doesn't erase intention. It doesn't rewind time. It doesn't unsay the words you speak when you believe the person you're talking about will never hear them. I know, I said softly. I hope one day you're sorry for the right reasons. Not just because your plan didn't work. She flinched. Mark grabbed her arm. We're done here, he said. They left. The door shut behind them with a dull, heavy sound. I sat alone at the table, the audio recorder still between the empty plates. The smell of stew lingering in the air. I had just watched my image as a father crack into pieces. And yet, for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had finally stood up for myself. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet, sometimes. My phone, once full of texts and calls from Emily asking for favors, advice, or money, stayed still. No buzzing. No late night, Dad, are you awake? Messages. No, can you help us with requests? At first, the silence felt like punishment, like someone had pressed mute on my life. I didn't know what to do with all the extra time I had when I wasn't worried about their bills, their rent, their crises. I found myself wandering from room to room in my house, touching old objects like they were relics from another life. One afternoon, I stood in front of the bookshelf and noticed a layer of dust on the photo frames. There she was, Emily at age 5, holding up a crooked drawing with a proud grin. Emily dressed as a fairy princess for Halloween. Emily sitting on Laura's shoulders at the beach, sand all over her legs. I felt tears sting my eyes. I'm sorry, I whispered to the empty room. I'm sorry I let you grow up thinking love meant yes every time. I'm sorry I never taught you that no can also be love. Grief is strange. You can mourn a person who's still alive. You can miss the version of them that existed before they made choices you can't understand. But grief can also clear space. In that space, for the first time in years, I thought about myself, not as Emily's dad, just as Daniel. I realized I didn't even know what I liked to do anymore. My hobbies had slowly been replaced by solving other people's problems. My dreams had shrunk to fit inside their needs. So I made a list. It was a simple thing. A piece of paper on the kitchen table, a pen in my hand. At the top, I wrote, things I want to try before I'm too old to pretend I'm not. The first few lines were small. Take a weekend trip alone. Learn to cook something that isn't stew or pasta. Join a book club. Fix the old radio in the garage. Then they grew bigger. Make new friends. Stop apologizing for spending money on myself. Forgive myself for not being a perfect father. On the second week, I got a knock on my door. I opened it to find Alex standing there, hands in his pockets, expression hesitant. Hey, he said, sorry to drop by unannounced. I just wanted to see how you were. A month ago, I barely knew his name. Now, he was one of the few people who had seen me at my lowest. Come in, I said. We sat at the table with 2 mugs of coffee between us. Did they talk to you? I asked softly. He nodded. Yeah, he said. They weren't happy. They wanted to know how I could betray them like that. Said it was family business, and I had no right to get involved. I swallowed. What did you say? I asked. I said, sometimes the people who won't hurt you aren't the ones you're related to, he replied. They're the ones who can't watch something wrong happen in front of them and stay silent. I looked at him for a long moment. Thank you, I said, for not staying silent. He shrugged. I know what it's like to have family treat you like you owe them everything, he said quietly. I watched my own parents do that to my grandmother. took everything from her for her own good. She died in a tiny apartment she never chose. I promised myself if I ever saw it happening again, I'd try to stop it. We sat in silence for a while. Do you hear them much now? I finally asked, meaning Emily and Mark. Not as much, he said. There were a few loud fights. Sounded like they were arguing about money and ruined plans. Lately it's been quieter. I think they're going through it. A part of me ached for her, even now. Another part of me knew this was a result of her choices. I hope, I said slowly, that one day she understands what she almost did. Not just to me, to herself. Maybe she will, Alex said. Maybe she won't. Either way, you did what you needed to do. He was right. Some nights, the hurt still felt fresh. I'd lie in bed and replay her words in my head, the tone of her voice. The casual cruelty of someone who believed love was something you could cash out like a check. But over time, the sharp edges dulled, not because the betrayal was any less real, because I stopped letting it define everything. Emily did reach out again eventually. Weeks later, she called. Her voice was quieter, stripped of the bright performance she once wore like armor. Dad, she said, can we talk? We met at a park, on a bench under a tree we used to sit beneath when she was a kid. I've been thinking a lot, she said, staring at her hands. About everything. About what I said. What I did. I listened. I was angry at you for saying no, she continued. But really, I was angry at myself for needing your help in the first place. It was easy to blame you than to admit we'd made bad choices. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away, she said. I don't want the last version of me in your head to be the worst one. I took a breath. I will always love you, I said softly. That will never change. But love doesn't mean I ignore what you tried to do. It doesn't mean I hand you the knife and say, go ahead, I'll heal. She nodded. I know, she whispered. We didn't fix everything that day. You can't rebuild a house in one afternoon, especially after you've set fire to half the rooms. But we picked up a few bricks. We placed them down. We started. And somewhere in that slow, painful process, I realized something important. My revenge hadn't been about hurting her back. It had been about refusing to let her destroy me. And that was enough. If you've made it this far into my story, you might be waiting for some big, dramatic ending. Maybe you wanted to hear that I left my daughter with nothing, that she lost everything and came crawling back, begging for mercy, that I watched karma hit her like a storm. Life is rarely that clean. What actually happened is quieter, more complicated, and, in some ways, more human. Emily and I are still in each other's lives. Not like before. Not with the same blind trust. Not with the same simplicity. But we speak. She visits sometimes, alone without Mark. She tells me she's looking for work, trying to stand on her own feet. Sometimes I believe her. Sometimes I'm not sure. I've learned that trust isn't a switch you flip back on. Because someone says, I'm sorry. Trust is a bridge rebuilt plank by plank or not at all. I chose not to burn that bridge completely. But I also chose not to walk across it without checking where I stepped. And that is the biggest lesson betrayal taught me. Here's what I know now. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's sacrifice. And sacrifice without respect becomes self-destruction. For years, I thought being a good father meant always saying yes. Always rescuing. Always giving, even when it hurt. I thought if I just poured enough of myself into my child's life, she would never fall, never struggle, never see me as anything other than her hero. But children don't learn respect from getting everything they want. They learn it from being told the truth, even when the truth is no. The neighbor's warning, don't go inside, didn't just save me from signing a document. It saved me from stepping into a role I was never meant to play. A man who gave away his own life so others wouldn't have to build theirs. My revenge wasn't explosive or violent or cruel. It was a decision to stop apologizing for taking up space in my own story, a decision to protect what I had worked for, a decision to demand that love be mutual, not a one-way transaction. If you're listening to this and you feel a familiar ache, If there's someone in your life who only calls when they need something, who uses guilt instead of gratitude, who talks about you like you're a resource and not a person, hear me clearly. Setting boundaries is not betrayal. Refusing to be used is not cruelty. Saying no does not mean you don't love them. It means you finally love yourself too. I still keep the little audio recorder in a drawer, not because I want to replay it. I haven't listened to it since that night at the table, but because it reminds me of something important. People show you who they truly are when they think you're not listening, when they don't know the mic is on, when they think the walls are thick enough, when they believe you'll never hear the words they say about you. If you're lucky, you'll have your own Alex. Someone who cares enough to say, "Don't go inside," when they see you walking toward a trap with your heart wide open. But even if you don't, you still have something powerful. You have the right to pause, to think, to read every line before you sign, to ask, if they love me, would they really ask this of me? The truth nearly broke me, but it also rebuilt me, not as the perfect father I was trying to be, but as a whole person who finally understood this. Love is not proven by how much you're willing to lose for someone. Sometimes real love for them and for yourself is proven by how bravely you're willing to say, "This is where I stop."